Wake up and you're already drowning. Not in water, but in expectations. The alarm hasn't even finished ringing, and your mind is already racing through the day's demands, cataloging failures from yesterday, preparing for battles that haven't begun. Your body moves through the motions of morning routine, but something deeper remains paralyzed, weighed down by an invisible force that has no name, no face, no clear enemy to fight. You look around and everything appears normal. The coffee maker works. Your phone lights up with notifications that masquerade as opportunities. The world outside continues its relentless march forward, and everyone seems to have figured out the secret of functioning that somehow eludes you. Social media feeds overflow with success stories, motivational quotes, and people who appear to have cracked the code of productive living. Just do it, they say. Manifest your dreams, they whisper. You've got this. They cheer from their perfectly curated squares of digital life. But here's what nobody tells you. What gets buried beneath the avalanche of productivity hacks and self-improvement mantras. You are not failing at life. Life, as we've constructed it, is failing you. You are not broken. The system is broken. You are not lazy. You are exhausted by a society that has turned your very existence into a performance that never ends, never rests, never allows you to simply be human. We live in what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the burnout society, a world where the old forms of oppression have been replaced by something far more insidious and effective. There are no visible chains anymore, no obvious tyrants barking orders, no clear lines between oppressor and oppressed. Instead, there's something much more sophisticated, the illusion of freedom coupled with the reality of total control. You believe you're free because you can choose your career, your lifestyle, your goals, but every choice leads to the same destination: more work, more optimization, more relentless self-improvement. The prison has no walls, but it has metrics. The punishment isn't physical, it's psychological. And the guard isn't outside watching you, it's inside your head, working 24 hours a day, measuring your worth against impossible standards, finding you lacking in ways you can't even articulate. You have become both the prisoner and the warden of your own existence. This is the performance society, and it operates on a simple but devastating principle. Everything depends on you, your success, your happiness, your health, your relationships, your spiritual growth. It's all your responsibility. You are the CEO of your own life, the brand manager of your personal identity, the performance coach of your daily existence. And just like any CEO, you can never truly clock out. There's always another metric to improve, another goal to chase, another version of yourself to become. Consider how even rest has been weaponized. Sleep is no longer recovery, it's optimization. You track your REM cycles, calculate your sleep debt, and optimize your bedroom environment for maximum restorative benefit. Exercise isn't joy or play, it's maintenance and improvement. You measure steps, heart rates, and calories burned. Reading isn't pleasure, it's personal development. You consume books like productivity supplements, always asking what you can extract, what lesson you can apply, what edge you can gain. Meditation, once a practice of letting go, has become another item on your self-improvement checklist. Mindfulness apps gamify inner peace with streaks and achievements. Even spirituality gets packaged as life coaching, promising better performance in exchange for enlightenment. Nothing escapes the logic of optimization. Nothing remains sacred from the demand to be useful, productive, measurable. And when you inevitably fall short, because how could you not fall short of infinite expectations, you don't blame the system. You blame yourself. You internalize the failure. You buy another course, download another app, commit to another morning routine, convinced that you just need to try harder, be more disciplined, find the right formula for success. This is the cruel genius of the burnout society. It has convinced you that your exhaustion is your fault, that your anxiety is a personal deficiency, that your inability to keep up with impossible demands is evidence of your inadequacy rather than evidence of the system's dysfunction. The oppression has become so complete that you oppress yourself willingly, even gratefully, believing that this is what freedom looks like. But freedom doesn't feel like drowning. Freedom doesn't require you to optimize every breath, monetize every passion, and treat your own body and mind like a startup that needs to achieve exponential growth or face extinction. Freedom doesn't make you sick with guilt for taking a day off, or spending an evening doing absolutely nothing productive. What you're experiencing isn't personal failure, it's collective trauma. It's the psychological equivalent of an autoimmune disease, where your own defenses have turned against you, where your natural desire for rest, play, and simple existence has been labeled as laziness, where your human need for rhythm and seasons has been overridden by the demand for constant output. The fatigue you feel isn't just tiredness, it's soul exhaustion. It's the accumulated weight of living in a state of permanent emergency, where every day requires you to prove your right to exist through what you produce, achieve, or optimize. It's the bone-deep weariness that comes from treating yourself like a machine that should run efficiently rather than a living being that needs care, attention, and sometimes just the freedom to exist without purpose. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not falling behind. You are a human being trying to survive in a system that has forgotten what human beings actually need to thrive. You are experiencing a natural response to an unnatural way of living. Your burnout is not a bug in your personal operating system. It's a feature of a society that has made exhaustion profitable and rest revolutionary. The voice in your head that never stops pushing, never stops demanding, never stops measuring, that's not your voice. That's the voice of a system that has colonized your inner world so completely that you can no longer tell where its demands end and your authentic desires begin. That voice that says you should be doing more, being more, achieving more, that's not wisdom. That's the sound of your own exploitation, dressed up as motivation. The most devastating realization is that we've been sold the idea that this internal tyranny is actually empowerment. We call it taking ownership of your life or being accountable for your success. We frame self-exploitation as entrepreneurship, self-punishment as discipline, and self-surveillance as mindfulness. We've learned to celebrate our own imprisonment as if it were liberation, but something inside you knows better. Something deeper than the motivational mantras and productivity systems recognizes that this isn't how life is supposed to feel. That's why you're here, reading these words, looking for something that the endless cycle of self-improvement couldn't provide. That's why the exhaustion feels different this time, not just physical tiredness, but existential depletion, an emptiness that no amount of achievement seems to fill. The burnout society operates on what Han calls toxic positivity, the relentless demand that everything be framed as opportunity, that every obstacle become a chance for growth, that every failure transform into a lesson. You're not allowed to simply feel tired without it becoming a productivity problem to solve. You can't be sad without it becoming emotional work to optimize. You can't just exist in a moment of difficulty without turning it into content for your personal development journey. This toxic positivity creates what might be the most insidious form of violence ever devised, violence that doesn't look like violence, oppression that masquerades as freedom, exploitation that calls itself empowerment. When someone hits you, you know you've been attacked. When someone yells at you, you know you're being abused. But when society convinces you to attack yourself, to yell at yourself, to exploit yourself, and to call it self-care, the violence becomes invisible even to its victim. We've become what Han describes as entrepreneurs of our own selves, and entrepreneurs never rest. They're always looking for the next opportunity, the next optimization, the next edge. They treat their bodies like startups, their relationships like networking opportunities, their hobbies like side hustles. They measure everything, optimize everything, monetize everything, and when the inevitable breakdown comes, they don't question the model, they question their execution. The most tragic part is how we've lost touch with the simple human capacity for presence, for stillness, for what Han calls contemplative life. When was the last time you sat in genuine boredom without immediately reaching for stimulation? When did you last experience true leisure, not the kind that recharges you for more work, but the kind that exists for its own sake, that serves no purpose beyond the joy of existing in that moment? We've forgotten that boredom used to be fertile ground for creativity and self-discovery, that silence used to be a space for processing and integration rather than an emptiness that needed immediate filling, that doing nothing wasn't laziness, but a fundamental human need, as essential as sleep or food or connection. Instead, we live in a state of what Han calls hyperactivity, constant stimulation, constant input, constant doing. We multitask our way through life, consuming experiences rather than inhabiting them, checking boxes rather than checking in with ourselves. We've become addicted to busyness because stillness has become unbearable. In stillness, we might have to face the reality of how exhausted we are, how empty we feel, how far we've drifted from any authentic sense of self. The revolutionary act in our time isn't doing more or being more productive or optimizing further. The revolutionary act is the courage to stop, to refuse, to say no to the endless demands for more, to reclaim what Han calls the right not to improve, not to optimize, not to produce, not to perform, not to justify your existence through your output. This refusal isn't laziness, it's resistance. It's the recognition that your worth isn't determined by your productivity, that your value doesn't fluctuate with your achievements, that your right to exist doesn't depend on your utility to others or even to yourself. It's the radical act of treating yourself like a human being rather than a human doing. But this resistance requires something our society has trained us to fear. Genuine solitude, not the kind of alone time where you're still consuming content or optimizing your environment, but the kind where you sit with yourself without agenda, without improvement goals, without the need to make the time useful. It requires what Han calls vita contemplativa, the contemplative life that allows for processing, integration, and the simple miracle of existing without having to justify that existence. The path out of burnout isn't another productivity system or self-care routine. It's not about finding better work-life balance or more efficient ways to manage your energy. It's about fundamentally questioning the entire framework that demands you manage yourself like a business, optimize yourself like a machine, and prove yourself worthy through constant performance. You don't need to fix yourself because you aren't broken. You need to exit a system that breaks people and then sells them the tools for self-repair. You need to stop trying to win a game that's designed to be unwinnable, to succeed in a system that requires your failure to function. The exhaustion you feel is your soul's way of saying enough. The burnout is your psyche's refusal to continue operating under impossible conditions. The depression, the anxiety, the sense of emptiness, these aren't personal pathologies. They're natural responses to an unnatural way of living. They're symptoms of a society that has made being human unsustainable. Your healing begins not with doing more, but with daring to do less. Not with finding new ways to optimize, but with questioning why everything needs to be optimized. Not with becoming a better version of yourself, but with accepting the version of yourself that exists right now, tired and imperfect, and beautifully, defiantly human. The burnout society wants you to believe that rest is laziness, that boundaries are weakness, that saying no is failure. But what if rest is resistance? What if boundaries are wisdom? What if saying no to what depletes you is the first step towards saying yes to what actually nourishes you? You are not lazy, you are not weak, you are not falling behind. You are waking up, and that awakening, however painful, is the beginning of something the burnout society cannot commodify or optimize: your return to yourself.